Welcome everybody. I hope you had a good break and are ready to get some more technical information. I know it's hard in the afternoon session to have something like that, but as you have heard a lot on complexity, but also positively on increasing efficiency, it's quite important that we also talk a little about hosting. But as I'm also not a technical expert, I have invited some guests for this panel. So please welcome on stage Sven Bange from our partner Vanilla Reply, Jonas Dambacher from our partner basecom, Jonas Kröger from our platform consulting company, and also Paul Stuefer from PhiAcademy, our merchant. Thank you for being with me today. And as not everyone might be aware of what you're doing with your companies, please introduce yourself a little.
My name is Jonas Kröger. I'm Director Customer Solutions for Platform.sh. What I'm essentially doing is helping translating technology into human speech, so to say.
Perfect. My name is Paul Stuefer. I'm the customer in this round. I work for PhiAcademy, which is an online shop for everything permanent makeup, beauty products. We ship in 160 countries worldwide. So that's what we do today.
Hi, I am Jonas Dambacher. I'm head of development at a partner agency, basecom.
I'm Sven Bange. I'm a managing director at Vanilla Reply. I'm interested in socio-technical aspects of all of this. And of course, we do Shopware development too. And we do a lot of PaaS. So I'm very excited.
Thank you all. As mentioned, we want to give you a little overview on the various technologies or on the various opportunities that you have for hosting. It's not too bad if you cannot read everything that we're showing here. We just want to give you a little heads up on what are your options. So when you see it from left to right, you have on first the on-premise, which is basically you're doing everything on your own when it comes to hosting. You have infrastructure as a service where you have little support and you do not have to do everything on your own. Then you have the platform as a service, which is what we will be focusing on today. And then there's the SaaS environment where you basically everything is managed for you. So as you can see, the more we go to the right, the service level is increasing, but the things you have under your own control is decreasing. And this has some positive aspects, but also some downsides maybe, but this is what we're going to discuss today. As I said, as we will be focusing on the PaaS as a rather new service opportunity also within Shopware, I'd like Jonas to introduce you something on how a PaaS workflow will work differently than we have, for example, like a SaaS, where you see that the newest Shopware release is already there for you without that you have to do anything on your own.
Thank you. So we learned recently on the previous slide that with PaaS you still have control about your application data, so where it sits, for example, but also the code itself, which is a big difference compared to a SaaS, for example. I would encourage all of you to think of this topic, infrastructure hosting, not only for we need some place where the shop runs in production, but really think a little bit more end-to-end. The infrastructure topic starts with development, where you want to give your developers access easily to not only code, but also show what they're doing, test what they're doing, configure and manage the infrastructure, ideally in an automated way themselves. And then you want to enable all your teams, not only the technical parts, to collaborate with, for example, instant environments that they can easily spin up. So everybody talks about the same thing and make sure you can, well, test and collaborate on the latest feature very easily and give feedback so you are working on the right things that you want to focus on as a merchant. And then when it comes to where to deploy, so I mentioned that you want to have control over your data. That means that even in cloud environments, you want to have control. So maybe you prefer one infrastructure provider over another, or you are in a position where from a compliance perspective, you have a better feeling when it's deployed inside Germany. That's totally fine, and you should have those choices. And the other topic there is vendor lock-in. So you want to ensure that you are not investing in a system that you can't get out of easily if you have to, and that is not as open as you prefer, especially in Shopware. As we all know and like, openness is a big part, so why should it stop with the infrastructure side of things? And then obviously later on in the workflow and when it comes to running your system, making sure it scales efficiently, making sure it has the right level of security and compliance. PCI DSS in e-commerce world is mandatory most of the time. That is also something you want to focus on. So it's really more about the whole circle and not just about putting a software somewhere to run, but really start earlier to think about it, which gives you more opportunities to optimize. And I think we'll hear more about this in the next couple of minutes.
Thank you. As you're most likely the PaaS ambassador in this round, so maybe you can start and just tell us what's the most important thing when, as a merchant or as an agency partner, you start working with PaaS that's really helping you to speed up, to save costs? What is your view on that?
I think in the end it comes down to a build versus buy decision. So do you really want to invest and build everything yourself and start from scratch and yes, you have full control, but it also means you have to maintain everything. Security is a big topic, is updates all the time. And you want to make sure that not only your Shopware application is up to date, but everything underneath, the PHP layer, databases, kernel updates for your Linux installation, and that kind of stuff. So do you really want to have somebody and a team or your developers to focus on this? Or you want to focus them on implementing new features, improving the experience for your end users, and develop new features? Or what do you want to spend your time on? I think that's mainly where it brings a lot of benefits. And the idea is the more infrastructure you abstract away, the more you can focus on what is actually important for you to generate revenue.
So Paul, do you want to maintain your Linux kernel and do you want to have it up to date? Who of the merchants really knows why is it important to have the Linux kernel up to date, right? So, Paul, what do you think about that?
That's definitely my hobby on weekends. No, to be honest, no, that's exactly what we as a medium-sized company don't want to do. We had been running AWS servers before, but always with a DevOps external agency. And since we changed our whole system to this PaaS environment, we have now Platform.sh doing all of these processes, which means we can really focus on outputs for our customers instead of, okay, does the system actually run? How shall we set it up? Are there any updates or anything? Infrastructure is for us something we don't want to care about, to be honest. The only thing we want to care about is it fast enough? If not, can we fix it by infrastructure, or do we need to delete a couple of sliders on the homepage?
Yeah, but as you're focusing on the experience, there might be some issues with having the best experience on your website, but having a lot of load on the service then. So, yeah. Jonas, you as an agency partner running a lot of projects with customers, what do you prefer when it comes to hosting?
Yeah, so basically most of our customers use PaaS systems for hosting because as an agency it's really simple to just set up the project. So if you compare to a traditional hosting, you have you need some pipeline to deploy the code your developers developed to the server, and with PaaS, for example, you can just only have to put the code on the system, and the PaaS does the rest.
And do you also think the same, Sven? I mean, as you're also working on the agency side, is it easier for you to set this up, or is it more work? Do you need different people for that?
It's much easier. And it's a Kickstarter. You know, you're ready on day 1 or day 2, whatever, and you can start to really concentrate and focus on the domain side. So, and it also takes off cognitive load of the developers and of the whole team, so to say, because nobody has to really think about, well, how will this run in production? How do we do the updates and so on? So we care deeply about infrastructure, but we don't want to do it in that way.
Okay. I mean, we talked about having a Kickstarter and the time to market maybe. When you're deploying systems compared to something like AWS or other hostings, do you see any advantages when running on a PaaS system?
Yes, definitely. So in the past, we used AWS for hosting the Shopware shops, and it took about 1 to 3 days to have the setup running and have a live system running, have a staging system running, and review apps for testing new features and code. And with PaaS, you can, I think we decrease the time for the shop setup to about 2 hours.
So from multiple hours and days or days to just 2 hours for a complete system?
Yeah, yeah.
Have you experienced the same when working with PaaS systems, or?
Yes, we did, but that's great. But that's, of course, if you have a project that runs a bit, it's not the most important thing, I believe. Much more important to me are those, well, the management, the updates of the security side of the application or the infrastructure. That's where we would have to have several people watching our systems to be on the safe side, and that's what we simply do not need anymore if we use PaaS systems.
Paul, for you as a customer, was it a benefit for you that the initial blank system was up and running faster, or was it just a positive side effect of running a PaaS system?
It was one of the reasons why we picked explicitly PaaS, because the sales speeches, it's out of the box, so you pick it, it's up and running, you can start developing from day one, and that actually what was happening, because we had a quite short timeline and we reduced it by a month, so we were up and live within 3.5 months in front of the customer. And this is what we needed at that point, because we had an old system running which was hardly maintained and all of that stuff, so definitely a decision to pick.
Everyone said they are not really happy managing infrastructure. You guys are doing that a lot, managing and consulting on PaaS infrastructures. What kind of effort does it need to especially keep things like security updates and managing attacks on those platforms? How much effort is that for you guys when managing something like that?
I think obviously we run thousands of customers, so we also don't want to do this our own manually, right? So we have automated this under the hood, and probably one of the good examples is a topic like 24/7 support. That's obviously something you need when you run an infrastructure like this. And if you actually think about how many people do you need to run this, it's at least 7, just the number 7 people to guarantee any 24/7 support, because there's always somebody who's sick, who's on vacation, who has something else to do. So those are the kind of things that we wanted to take away as much as we can. So for us, it's about providing this for our customers, because we do this every day, all day long, and also automating as much as possible on our side.
Okay. So we heard a lot that one advantage of the PaaS system is that you can run a lot of instances in parallel and get them up quickly. And especially, I mean, Paul, when you're running an experience-rich front end, how important is it for you to have multiple stagings to test a lot of features in parallel?
I mean, independent from having multiple test environments and staging environments, it's fairly easy to get new users on it, which means every colleague can log into a test environment really easy, and it looks fairly the same like our live system, so they can act like a normal user on the website. That's one of the biggest benefits. And furthermore, we increase the time to market by having these environments massively, because I come from different environments where we had all of the systems on-premise, which meant we had one release every quarter. If you don't get in that release, have fun getting into the next one. And this is easily fixed because you have everything which is tested getting on stage. Last final test, there you go, gets live as soon as we want to. And that's a massive change, especially I think for developers. It's different than having on-premise stuff in the old-fashioned way.
For you as an agency partner, if a customer is managing multiple staging environments and maybe having different branches on those, how do you feel about that as an integration partner?
Good and bad. So the good part, of course, is we get to test independently, and the partner actually gets to test independent, so we're quite sure what we're releasing. But on the other hand, we have to manage this, because if we test one of the branches, we do not really know if all the other branches we will merge later on are compliant with this. So I think it's much better than it was before. So I think there's room, but you have to be aware of those situations where you don't really have continuous integration, where this is a technical term, but you cannot always be sure that those different branches you prepare are compatible to each other.
And maybe I can add something to this one. Shopware is mainly built on extensions and apps. And just with Wildcard, testing stuff out is something you can do so easy and so good on these test environments, even though you need to build them up. But as soon as you don't want them, you trash them, build up a fresh one, next feature. And that's something which is just insanely positive on that side.
I mean, we had one case, just before we came on stage, we had like one case where Paul mentioned we need to get our redesign tested. And everyone knows deploying a redesign to an online shop is quite an extensive part. I mean, it's basically like relaunching the complete shop. Jonas, do you think this is an advantage if you run a PaaS environment and have multiple stagings? Is it adding a lot more complexity? Would you do it in live?
Yeah. What is really cool about the staging systems is that you can have the autosync enabled. So if you enable the autosync, then it will just copy all data from, for example, from the staging system to your development environment, and you can test the feature with the data you have there. You can also do the sync from the live system and so on, and that helps a lot to check those changes in the content, for example.
Okay. When we started this panel, you mentioned something on cognitive load for your developers. When running a PaaS environment, how do skills change that you need on your team, and how does your structure change that maybe you have on your development teams for customers?
Well, we have some persons doing DevOps in our company, and with these projects we mainly do not need them anymore. So we've got other projects where we need them, luckily, but those PaaS projects require a bit more knowledge of the developers, but they're very happy with this circumstance because they get to have much more say about the infrastructure they provide and they provision for their use cases. So yeah, we get better knowledge developers, and we do need less silos like infrastructure persons. Yeah.
And another thing is that you can cut off the DevOps resources, but the Platform.sh or PaaS system in general is oriented to the developers. So it's built for developers to host the software and not for engineers to host something.
How do you help, Jonas, to train those developers to get all the new knowledge when, I mean, this is something new for them and they need to make sure that they know all the options they have, how to quickly set up instances and trash them? How could you help?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's always a learning curve when you have new systems, so it doesn't make sense to lie and say there's nothing to learn. So definitely there's things to learn. I think, as Jonas mentioned, we try to come from a developer mindset and make things expected. No, and developers don't like surprises, honestly, in the end, right? So if they expect something to work like a specific thing, it should work like this. And that's what we are always trying to. We can never fit all. Other than that, we do a lot of help with, obviously, public documentation for sure, but also onboarding processes where we give specific training for the specific projects, especially the enterprise context that we usually work in. Makes sense to invest the time in the beginning. And one thing I wanted to pick up from Sven and Jonas as well is that DevOps, by design, was never intended to be a role. It was an idea, right? Sysadmins are most of the time these days then called DevOps, but they're doing sysadmin stuff. So essentially, with giving developers more control, it's really more integrating this idea of what DevOps is, and it's controlled by them. So coming back to the learning curve, yes, you do have to learn something, but then you are still in charge of how the infrastructure behaves and what should be deployed, what kind of components you need, similar to application dependencies, technical term. But similar to that, you have also dependencies on infrastructure, and it should be as easy as that to just describe, this is what we need, give it to me, I don't care how it gets done under the hood.
When you say we have different skill set, we have like agency level, we have also customers, is it easier for you on a PaaS level to assign some rights and roles to customers so that you can give them a little self-service on the portal, but keeping everything else close to them? Is that an advantage for you?
I think the possibility is to give more granular access to environments. So we heard that everything is in flux and dynamic and everybody can spin up anything all the time, but sure, as a customer, you want to have control who can access what kind of data. So let me give you an example. A good use case can be that you bring in a freelancer, even as an agency or as an end customer, you bring in a freelancer who should work on the project for a couple of months until it goes live, and then your core team takes over the maintenance mode. That is something where you probably don't want to give a freelancer access to your production system, but they should be able to spin up environments to work on staging systems and even have access to the data on there to make sure they can develop what they are supposed to do. So I think this kind of granular access is really important and possible, obviously, to make sure you have the flexibility you need to bring in people as you need, and then offboard them when you need as well.
All right. Paul, do you use a lot of those accesses to the system? Do you and your team really actively look into the environments, or is it really just something that you and your teams don't care about?
We hardly care about it. We have our agency doing it, luckily. What we care about is having it directly in Shopware. So we have rights and rules management in Shopware, and that's where we use it mainly. Everything else on the development environment is up to our agency, so Sven's.
Okay. There's one other non-technical aspect I'd like to talk. I mean, if you have an on-premise hosting, for example, you have everything on your bill. So, and if you're then changing to a managed hosting, for example, with the Shopware PaaS, the cost structure will change. Sven, do you have an opinion on how that may also help merchants with their finance department when making such a decision?
Yes, so if you still got an on-prem environment, you're having costs as capital expenditure. So if you move over, be it PaaS or be it infrastructure as a service, you lose this and to move over from CapEx to OpEx to operational expenses, and that some of you at least probably would like to do that, some others maybe not, but it's something you can use, and you should think of. We learned today or tomorrow that capital is getting more expensive, so maybe that's the way to cut there. And of course, not only that, it's just no time to run on premise anymore.
So when we're coming now to the closing remarks, is this something that's like your view on PaaS, that it's an ideal option for merchants, or what would be your opinion? What's the best way to combine also with Shopware project?
So to be careful, I need to say it depends, but no, I'm really in love with PaaS. So it takes off so much load of us as an agency. We mentioned 24/7. We mentioned cognitive load. We mentioned updates, where you have to have persons doing that. It's just very nice. We can focus on our core business, and that's making business for our customers, not doing infrastructure. So I'm with that, and I'm pretty sure that's directly related to our customers. They will profit off of that.
All right. Anything to add from you guys to that, or? So, thank you for listening. Thank you for participating in this little panel discussions. We will be at the speaker booth if you have any questions. You can also request some demos and have a view on Shopware PaaS at our booth right in the next hall. So if you're interested in getting a live demo on how to set up instances, I guess we can do everything like that, or at least arrange so. Of course, this is just another option to host Shopware. There's still the on-premise, which is working. There's also the SaaS if you're interested in a really seamless way to host your system. But of course, PaaS will add another dimension to this and another opportunity, especially if you want to take some more responsibility on your code and your application. So thank you.